Hello again, you delightful Godot people. In this video, we're going to add a button. And I'm very excited about this because I like pressing buttons. Buttons are fun. So, buttons! Why are we doing this? Because some people like to press a button when they're filling out an online form. Some people like to press enter. I want to give the player an option of doing either, so that if you're somebody that doesn't know you can press enter on a form, it won't confuse you. I want to make this as intuitive as possible to play. Remember, challenging gameplay should be a decision we make, not a result of incomplete interface. All right, so if we want to add a button, let's talk about what needs to happen. The first thing that needs to happen is we're going to add a textured button. By this, I mean a button with an image on it, an image being a texture. I want to add a label for the button, something that tells the player what it does. I want to make sure that the button and the new label align neatly, right? So when I resize the screen, I want everything to look good. And I want to make sure that the button works just like pressing enter in the player text in that line edit node we made. So when I do it, it'll do the exact same functionality. So let's get into Godot. And the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at the button node. So if I go in here and I type in button, you'll see we've got a few different options. A standard button, if I just create it really quickly, is, let's make you bigger, a thing we can press. It's not textured. There are things we can do to make it look textured, and we'll look at those later in the course. They involve themes, if you're interested, but it can take its own label. And by default, it uses the standard Godot look, and it's not quite what I'm looking for. I want a texture button. So I'm going to delete this node and open this and take a look at a texture button. Where do you go? Come back. Texture button. There you are. A texture button is, if I go over to the inspector and click on textures, a button that has a different look depending on what's happening. So you'll see over here in graphics, I've already got open, I've got two different files. One is the normal button and one is the button press. So if I take button 11, blue button 11, and put it into normal, there's our button. And then when I move into pressed, there it is. I'm not going to do hover, disabled, focus, or click mask because those aren't important for this game. So if I press play, we now have a button in the top corner that when I press it, animates, but doesn't actually do anything. Okay, so let's make it do something. Well, before that, let's put it in the right place. I want it down here, and I want it to organize neatly. If I just put it into the VBox container, it's going to be vertically sorted, and I can put it down here, but that's not what I want. So I'm going to move it out of the VBox container, and within the VBox container, I'm going to add a new type of container. I'm going to add an HBox container, a horizontal box container. So let's do that, an HBox container, and here it is. Now, I want my label in there, so I'm going to drag the label into HBox container. And you'll see it organizes from the left. And now I'm going to put my texture button in there. And it's on the right. But it's not quite neat, is it? Well, let's take a look at what we can do. If I go to the player text, which remember is a line edit node, and I scroll down to size flags, which I've already got open because I was just prototyping this. If I click on expand on the horizontal, it's telling the node on the horizontal, take up as much room as you can. If I switch that off, it won't do that. That's very useful. However, you'll see the button isn't the right size. So let's take a look at the size of this text. We'll see it's 73 pixels. I could make this texture 73 by 73. So let's go to texture button and scroll down to rect. Not hint, rect, there it is. It's already 73 on the Y. I want it 73 on the X. Okay, the node is the right size, the image isn't. To get the image the right size, I'm going to scroll all the way to the top of the inspector, and right here it says expand. I'm just going to switch that on. Oh no, it vanished. Why? Because I told it that size, I didn't tell it the minimum size. So let's give it a minimum size of 73 by 73. This means you have to be at least this size. So now when I press play, note the line edit won't work because we've moved its position. We'll have to fix that in a minute, but the button works fine. All right, so now let's put a label in. So back into HBox container, add a label. And it doesn't have the default font, so I'm going to go into custom font, and I'm going to give it a new dynamic font. Click on that, and just like before, drag in my felt pen. And do you want 40? We could do 40. Settings 40. And what should we write in here? Let's write OK. Let's take a look at that. That's looking pretty solid. And when I resize it, look at that. The interface resizes perfectly. Final thing I'm going to do before we move into the functionality, I want to add a little bit of space between the button, the line edit, and the label. So let's go back to our HBox container, and you'll see here there's a thing saying custom constants. Let's click on that, and if I tell it 12, it'll say each thing has to be 12 pixels apart. I could say 8, I could say 24, doesn't really matter what, so I'll say 12 for now. Press play, see what that looks like in game. And now there's a nice little margin between the text edit, the line edit, sorry, the texture button, and the label. They're nicely spaced out. Okay, cool. Now what we need to do is actually wire it up so it works. So let's go back into the Looney Lips script, and you'll see right here, the player text is now in the wrong place, right? It's not in VBox container. It's in VBox container, HBox container. So what I'm going to do is make this nice and easy for myself. I'm going to delete that, leave the $, and just drag in player text into my script. Oop, it vanished. Come back script, press my script mode, and drag that back right there. And I don't really want the quotes because I don't need them. And now the line edit should work just fine. Awesome. But the button does nothing. So here's my challenge for you. I would like you to have the displayed text show whatever is in the player text when the button is pressed. In other words, make the button actually work. And a quick hint, if you're not sure what to do, it's going to be under signals. So pause the video, give that a shot, and when you come back, I'll show you my solution. Welcome back. So, first thing I need to do is wire this button in. Do I like the name texture button? I'm kind of okay with it. Let's go into Node, and I've got these signals here. 4 up here that are specific to button. They're not actually specific to texture buttons, they're specific to button, and texture button inherits from button. How do I know that? If I right click on it, and I go to Open Documentation, right at the top here, inherits base button, control canvas item. Remember when I showed you that button that doesn't take a texture? That's the base button. And I can even look in here and see what the signals do. So button up, button down, button up, pressed and toggled. Button down is while it's being held down. Button up is when it stops being held down. Pressed is just if it's clicked, and that's the one I want. I don't want it while the button is being held down, but if I wanted a game where that happens, let's say, I don't know, a car horn, I could do it that way. Why a car horn would be controlled by the mouse on a button, I don't know, but if you're making that game, that's how you do it. So I want pressed, and I'm going to connect it, and I've got my scene tree up here. I'm going to connect it to Looney Lips because that's where my script is. So let's connect it, and I'm okay with this method name, on texture button press. That looks good. All right, so here's on texture button press, and I probably don't need my output right now. So what do I want it to do? Well, the first thing I need to do is get whatever the text is. So I'm going to make a new variable in here called words. This new variable is going to be whatever is in the player text. So let's make a link to player text dot text. Okay, so the text property of that node. Remember, I want that property. If I just pull the node up as the variable, Godot will let me do that, but when they say, okay, now the display text equals this, it won't know what to do because I can't make a node be text. All right, so then what do I want to do? Well, now I just need to pass these words through to update display because we've already put that in. So I'm going to go update display text words. And you know what? Just to make it nice and neat, I'm going to select all 3 of these lines and I'm going to hold Alt and down arrow and just move them below so that I've got both methods, both functions that update the display text above the display text. So when I'm reading it, I can see what they do and then they come here. Let's see if that works. So press play. Does this work? Yes, it does. Hooray! Awesome. Look at that. We did it. We now have a way of getting text from the player and a functional button. And this label can be changed in text. So later when the story is finished, it'll work. You'll also notice that if I have nothing in here and I press it, it'll give me an empty string. There are things we can do to stop that from happening, but we're not going to worry about it too much right now. We're going to look at if statements, ifs, else ifs, and else later in the course, but there is something we could do. Meanwhile, in this video, we've looked at button and texture button nodes, HBox containers, and how to use fill and expand. We've also played a little bit more with how to pass arguments into functions and how to make sure we're not duplicating code, which is great stuff. So, excellent work, and I will see you in the next video.